2 letters, 1 seat, $500 million. That is the exact price tag of the mistake flight attendant Sarah Jenkins made on a rainy Tuesday morning at JFK International Airport. She looked at a man in a hoodie and saw a nuisance. She didn't realize she was looking at the owner of the very airplane she was standing on. In the world of high-stakes aviation, arrogance is dangerous, but prejudice? Prejudice is expensive. What you are about to hear is the true-to-life account of Marcus Thorne, a man who didn't scream, didn't fight, and didn't make a scene. He just made one phone call that turned a global airline stock into dust before the landing gear even touched the ground. This is how the customer is king rule was enforced with $1 billion hammer. The rain lashed against the reinforced glass of Terminal 4 at JFK International Airport, blurring the runway lights into streaks of neon red and white. Inside the exclusive Centurion Lounge, the atmosphere was hermetically sealed from the chaos of the general boarding gates. It smelled of espresso, aged leather, and old money. Marcus Thorne sat in the far corner, away from the buffet and the bar, nursing a sparkling water with a slice of lime. To the untrained eye, Marcus looked like he didn't belong. While the other patrons were dressed in bespoke Italian suits, flashing Rolex Submariners, and typing furiously on MacBooks, Marcus was wearing a charcoal grey hoodie, black joggers, and a pair of worn-in sneakers. He had a beanie pulled low over his forehead, obscuring eyes that were currently bloodshot from a 48-hour coding sprint. He wasn't trying to make a fashion statement. He was just tired. Bone tired. Marcus was the CEO and founder of Obsidian Dynamics, a private equity firm that specialized in hostile takeovers and aggressive restructuring of failing tech giants. Last week, Forbes had quietly updated his net worth to $12 billion. But Marcus hated the limelight. He didn't travel with an entourage. He didn't have a personal assistant carrying his bags. He liked to move through the world like a ghost, unseen, unheard, and unbothered. Today, he was flying Aero Vantage, a legacy carrier that had recently been trying to rebrand itself as the height of luxury. Marcus had purchased a full-fare first-class ticket, Seat 1A, specifically for the lie-flat privacy pod. He had a board meeting in London the next morning, where he was planning to acquire a robotics firm, and he needed 7 hours of uninterrupted sleep. "Mr. Thorne?" Marcus looked up. A lounge attendant, a young woman named Emily with a kind smile, stood there holding a fresh glass of water. "Your flight, AV88 to London Heathrow, is beginning to board. Do you want me to call a cart for you?" Marcus smiled, a genuine warm expression that transformed his tired face. "No thank you, Emily. I could use the walk, stretch the legs before the metal tube, right? Safe travels, Mr. Thorne." He grabbed his duffel bag, a nondescript black canvas bag that happened to be filled with encrypted hard drives worth more than the GDP of a small country, and headed for the exit. As he merged into the general population of the terminal, the noise hit him. Crying babies, announcements blaring over the PA system, the squeak of sneakers on linoleum. He kept his head down, moving with the fluid grace of a man who knew exactly where he was going. When he arrived at gate B32, the line for economy was already snake-like, wrapping around the seating area. The line for priority first was empty, save for a red velvet rope. Marcus walked up to the podium. The gate agent, a harried-looking man named Greg, was typing furiously. He glanced up, saw the hoodie, and frowned. "Zone 5 is boarding in 10 minutes, sir. Please wait for your group number to be called," Greg said, his eyes already returning to his screen. Marcus didn't blink. He was used to this. "I'm in Zone 1, first class." Greg stopped typing. He looked up again, this time with a mixture of skepticism and annoyance. He looked Marcus up and down, lingering on the sneakers. Can I see your boarding pass? Marcus pulled up the QR code on his phone and held it out. The machine beeped a cheerful green. 1A, Thorne, Marcus. Greg's eyebrows shot up. He looked at the screen, then back at Marcus, then back at the screen. There was a moment of hesitation, a flicker of cognitive dissonance. He couldn't reconcile the image of the man in front of him with the price of the ticket scanned. Right, Greg said, his voice losing its authoritative edge but retaining a chilly undertone. Go ahead. Down the jet bridge, take a left. Thanks, Marcus said softly. He walked down the jet bridge, the cool air of the tunnel hitting his face. He was looking forward to the champagne, the noise-cancelling headphones, and the oblivion of sleep. He stepped onto the plane. Standing at the galley entrance was the lead flight attendant. Her name tag read Sarah. She was immaculately groomed, her uniform pressed to military precision, her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun that seemed to pull her facial features into a permanent sneer. She was currently laughing with the co-pilot, but her smile vanished the second she saw Marcus. Boarding pass? She demanded, blocking the aisle with her hip. Marcus held up his phone again. Sarah stared at it. She didn't scan it immediately. She looked at Marcus, her eyes narrowing. Seat 1A. That's me, Marcus said, stepping forward. Wait right there, she said, putting a hand up, palm flat against his chest. It was a violation of personal space that made Marcus's jaw tighten. There's a problem with the manifest. The gate agent just cleared me, Marcus said, his voice remaining level. The gate agent is outside. I am in charge of this cabin, Sarah snapped. She picked up the cabin phone and dialed a code, whispering something, while keeping her eyes locked on Marcus, like he was a stray dog trying to sneak into a butcher shop. She hung up and turned back to him, a sickly sweet, fake smile plastered on her face. Sir, unfortunately, we have a double booking situation on seat 1A. It seems the system made an error. Marcus sighed. Okay, what about 1B? Or any other seat in first? I'm not picky, I just need to sleep. First class is fully booked, Sarah said, her voice dripping with dismissal. As is business. I bought this ticket 3 weeks ago, Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave. Full fare. And as I said, it's a system error, Sarah replied, checking her nails. However, because we are accommodating, we have found you a seat in the main cabin. 42A. It's a middle seat, but it's all we have. Marcus stared at her. You want to downgrade me from a $10,000 suite to a middle seat in economy because of a glitch? If you don't take the seat, I'll have to ask you to deplane, Sarah said, her hand resting on the phone again. And if you cause a scene, I will call the airport police. Do you really want to deal with the police today, sir? The implication was heavy. A black man in a hoodie arguing with a blonde flight attendant. Marcus knew exactly how that headline would look. He knew how the video would be edited. He knew the narrative before it was even written. He took a deep breath, calculating the variables. He could fight this now, get arrested, miss his meeting, and lose the deal in London. Or he could take the seat, land in London, and handle this his way. The Obsidian way. 42E, Marcus repeated. Take it or leave it, Sarah said, turning her back on him to greet a couple behind him, an older white couple in expensive trench coats. Welcome aboard, Dr. and Mrs. Albright. Right this way to 2A and 2B. Champagne? The contrast was like a slap in the face. I'll take the seat, Marcus whispered. Good choice, Sarah threw over her shoulder without looking at him. Keep walking, all the way back. The walk to row 42 was a gauntlet of humiliation. Marcus had to squeeze past the business-class pods, where passengers were already settling in with hot towels and mimosas. He walked through premium economy, where people had extra legroom. Then he entered the main cabin. It was hot. The air conditioning hadn't fully kicked in yet. The overhead bins were already stuffed to capacity with oversized carry-ons. Row 42 was the second to last row of the plane, right next to the lavatories. The smell of chemical disinfectant was already wafting through the air. Seat 42E was exactly as advertised, a narrow sliver of fabric between a large man who was already asleep and snoring, and a teenager playing a video game at full volume without headphones. Marcus jammed his duffel bag under the seat in front of him, crushing his legs into a pretzel shape. He sat down, his knees digging into the plastic tray table. He closed his eyes. Just 7 hours, he told himself. Focus on the acquisition. But the humiliation wasn't over. About 10 minutes later, the boarding process was nearly complete. The plane was settling down. Suddenly, there was a commotion at the front of the cabin. Marcus leaned out into the aisle to see what was happening. Walking down the aisle, guided personally by Sarah Jenkins, was a young man. He couldn't have been more than 22. He was wearing a loud designer tracksuit, Gucci by the looks of it, and sunglasses indoors. He was loudly talking on his phone on speaker. "Yeah, bro, I know. I told my uncle. I ain't flying unless I'm in the front. And he made it happen. Yeah, bumped some rando. You know how we do it." Sarah was beaming at him. "Right this way, Mr. Sterling. We have seat 1A ready for you. Champagne is already poured." "Thanks, babe," the kid said, snapping his fingers at her. "Make sure the Wi-Fi is fast. I got a stream." Marcus froze. Sterling. The name triggered a file in his mental database. AeroVantage was owned by the Sterling Group. The CEO was Richard Sterling. This kid, this loud, obnoxious brat taking the seat Marcus had paid for, was likely Blake Sterling, the CEO's fail-son nephew who had been all over the tabloids for crashing a Ferrari in Monaco last month. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a double booking. Sarah Jenkins had looked at Marcus, seen a nobody in a hoodie, and decided he was expendable enough to kick out so she could suck up to the boss's nephew. She had profiled him, judged him, and demoted him, assuming he lacked the power or the connections to do anything about it. She thought he was powerless. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He still had 2 bars of signal before the doors closed. He didn't open Twitter to complain. He didn't open Instagram to post a sad selfie. He opened the Obsidian Dynamics secure trading app. From his cramped position in seat 42E, with the smell of the lavatory in his nose and the sound of the kid's video game in his ear, Marcus tapped on the search bar. He typed, AeroVantage Holdings. Current stock price, $42.50. Market cap, $12.4 billion. He navigated to the Corporate Contracts tab on his secure server. Obsidian Dynamics wasn't just a finance firm. It was a holding company that owned logistics partners, catering services, and fuel supply chains. More importantly, Obsidian controlled the travel contracts for 3 of the largest tech companies in Silicon Valley, companies that flew thousands of employees on AeroVantage every month. Marcus looked at the screen. His thumb hovered over the contact list. A flight attendant, not Sarah, but a younger, frantic-looking man, came by, slamming the overhead bins shut. "Sir, phone in airplane mode, now." "Just 1 second, Marcus said calmly. "Now," the attendant barked. Marcus switched the app to offline sync mode. He couldn't execute the trade or send the email until they reached cruising altitude and the Wi-Fi kicked in. That was fine. He had 7 hours. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Miller. We're just waiting on final paperwork and we'll be on our way to London. Flight time is 6 hours and 50 minutes. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the award-winning service of AeroVantage." In seat 1A, Blake Sterling was clinking a crystal flute of Dom Perignon against the window. In seat 42E, Marcus Thorne pulled his beanie down over his eyes. The engines whined to life. The plane began to push back. Marcus whispered into the darkness of his hoodie, "Enjoy it while it lasts, Sarah." The takeoff was rough. Being in the back of the plane meant feeling every sway and bump of the fuselage. The large man next to Marcus had spilled over the armrest, his elbow digging into Marcus's ribs. The teenager on the other side had spilled a soda, and the sticky liquid was inching toward Marcus's thigh. When the fasten seatbelt sign finally chimed off, the economy cabin erupted into chaos. People stood up immediately to grab bags. The line for the bathroom formed instantly, and the smell of reheated pasta began to circulate. Marcus didn't move. He reached into his pocket and retrieved his credit card. He needed to buy the Wi-Fi. He waited for the cart to come by. It took 45 minutes. When it finally reached row 42, Sarah Jenkins was manning it. She looked exhausted already, her fake smile straining at the edges. She looked at Marcus, and for a split second, recognition flashed in her eyes, the guy she kicked out, but she masked it with indifference. "Pretzels or cookies?" she asked, not making eye contact. "I need to purchase the Wi-Fi pass," Marcus said, "and a black coffee." "Wi-Fi is $25, Sarah said dismissively, "and we're out of coffee back here. Only tea." "I have a voucher for free Wi-Fi as a platinum flyer," Marcus said, holding out his card. Sarah laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Sir, platinum flyers sit in the front. If you were platinum, you wouldn't be in 42E. The machine is broken for vouchers back here. Card only." She was doubling down. She refused to believe that he was anyone of consequence. To her, he was just a liar, trying to scam free internet. Marcus handed her his card. It was a black titanium card, unmarked except for a chip, and his name etched in small silver letters. Sarah took it. She felt the weight of the metal. She paused, looking at it. Most people had plastic debit cards. This was heavy. She swiped it through her handheld device. Transaction approved. She handed it back, frowning slightly. "There, you have 2 hours. Don't stream movies, it slows it down for everyone else." "Thank you, Sarah," Marcus said. She froze. She hadn't told him her name during this interaction, though it was on her badge. It was the way he said it, not with anger, but with a terrifying finality. She pushed the cart past him, eager to get away. "Trash! Any trash?" she called out to the next row. Marcus connected his phone. The little Wi-Fi symbol appeared in the top corner. He was online. He opened his secure messaging app, Signal. He found the contact named Victoria, Chief Legal Officer. He typed, "Trigger Clause 14B on the AeroVantage Corporate Travel Agreement immediately, effective 12:14 p.m. EST. Victoria replied instantly, despite it being 11 p.m. in New York. "Are you sure, Marcus? Clause 14B is the material breach of service termination. That voids the contract for all 50,000 employees of our tech subsidiaries. That's an $80 million annual contract for them." Marcus typed, "I am sitting in seat 42E. I was forcibly removed from my paid first-class seat, so Blake Sterling could sit there. I was racially profiled and denied service. Execute it." "And Victoria?" "Yes, Marcus. Short the stock. Heavily. And leak the memo to the WSJ tech desk. Tell them Obsidian is pulling out due to declining service standards and discriminatory practices." Victoria sent a single emoji. Marcus switched apps. He opened his banking interface. He didn't just control contracts, he was a market mover. When Obsidian moved, the market listened. He placed a put option order, betting that AeroVantage's stock would drop. He leveraged $10 million of his personal liquid cash. Then he composed an email to his friend, David Solomon. the editor of a major financial news network. Subject: a story for the morning cycle. David, I'm currently on AV-88. I've just been demoted to economy so the CEO's nephew could have my seat. The crew was less than polite. I think it's time we re-evaluated the market's confidence in AeroVantage's leadership. I'm pulling all Obsidian accounts within the hour. Thought you'd want the scoop. M. He hit send. He put his phone down on the sticky tray table and crossed his arms. Now he waited. It takes light about 130 milliseconds to travel around the world via fiber optic cables. It takes the stock market about 30 seconds to react to a massive sell order. But on a plane, isolated in the sky, news travels differently. It travels via the cryptic messages sent to the cockpit from ground control. 30 minutes passed. Marcus watched a movie on the back of the seat in front of him without sound. Suddenly, the fasten seatbelt sign dinged on. The intercom crackled. It wasn't the pilot this time. It was the co-pilot, and his voice sounded strained. "Ah, folks, we have a bit of turbulence ahead. Flight attendants, please take your seats immediately. Ground control has advised us to secure the cabin." There was no turbulence outside. The sky was clear. The turbulence was financial, and it was hitting the airline's headquarters in Chicago with the force of a hurricane. Sarah Jenkins came rushing down the aisle, looking annoyed that her break was interrupted. She strapped herself into the jump seat, facing the rear, just 3 rows ahead of Marcus. She pulled out her personal phone, strictly against protocol, and checked her screen. Marcus watched her face. He saw the moment the color drained from her skin. He saw her eyes widen in horror. She was reading a news alert. Marcus knew exactly what it said. He could imagine the push notification from Bloomberg or CNBC. Breaking. Tech giant Obsidian. Dynamics terminates contract with AeroVantage. Cites discrimination against CEO Marcus Thorne. Airline stock plummets 12%. Sarah looked up. Her eyes scanned the rows of economy passengers. Frantic. Terrified. She was looking for the hoodie. And then she found him. Marcus was looking right at her. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just raised his plastic cup of lukewarm tea in a silent toast. Her phone slipped from her hand and clattered onto the floor. The atmosphere in the forward galley, usually a sanctuary for flight attendants to gossip and drink lukewarm coffee away from the passengers, had transformed into a war room of panic. Sarah Jenkins was trembling. The color had not returned to her face. She sat on a metal canister, her phone retrieved from the floor but now dark. She didn't need to look at it again. The headline was burned into her retinas. Obsidian Dynamics. Marcus Thorne. Discrimination. She ran the events of the boarding through her mind, desperately trying to find a loophole, a justification, a way out. He was wearing a hoodie. He didn't look like a CEO. How was I supposed to know? But deep down, the sickening dread in her stomach told her the truth. She should have checked the manifest properly. She shouldn't have judged, and she certainly shouldn't have been so smug about it. The cockpit door burst open. Captain Miller squeezed into the tiny galley space. He was a man in his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair and a retirement plan heavily invested in AeroVantage company stock options. Currently, he looked like he was having a cardiac event. "Sarah, what in God's name is going on back here?" he hissed, keeping his voice low so the first-class passengers wouldn't hear. "Captain, I don't know. I just saw the news alert," Sarah stammered. "Chicago just patched through to us via ACARS," Miller said, holding up a printed strip of paper that looked like an old-school telegram. His hands were shaking. "Headquarters is in full meltdown mode. They're asking if we have a passenger named Marcus Thorne on board, and why the hell the media is reporting that we assaulted him." "We didn't assault him," Sarah cried, defensive instincts kicking in. We had a double booking situation." "Don't lie to me, Sarah," Captain Miller growled, stepping closer. "I saw the manifest before we left. Seat 1A was Thorne. Then 5 minutes before doors closed, it changed to Sterling. You manually overrode the system. Why?" Sarah swallowed hard. "Mr. Sterling, Blake, he called ahead. He said his uncle wanted him in first. I thought I was just trying to accommodate the CEO's family." Captain Miller closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. "You bumped one of the most powerful black men in global finance, a man whose company spends $80 million a year with us, for a 22-year-old YouTube streamer whose uncle happens to be the CEO." When he put it like that, the stupidity of her action felt like a physical weight crushing her chest. "Where is he?" Miller demanded. "Where is Mr. Thorne?" Sarah pointed weakly toward the back of the plane. "Row 42. Seat E." The captain looked like he might actually vomit. "You put a $12 billion client in a middle seat by the toilets? I didn't know who he was." "That is exactly the problem, Sarah," Miller shouted, forgetting to whisper. A few heads in business class turned. "You're not supposed to treat anyone like that, regardless of who they are, but you picked the wrong guy to be arrogant with. Do you have any idea what's happening on the ground right now?" "My wife just texted me. The stock is in freefall. Trading has been halted twice in the last hour. Our retirement accounts just lost 30% of their value in 45 minutes." The reality of the situation began to dawn on the other 2 flight attendants in the galley. They looked at Sarah with a mixture of horror and fury. This wasn't just Sarah getting fired anymore. This was the kind of event that bankrupts airlines, leads to massive layoffs, and destroys pensions. "Fix it," Miller ordered. "How?" Sarah whispered. "I don't care how. Get him out of that seat. Bring him up here. Grovel. Apologize. Offer him the entire plane. Just get him to call off the dogs before we land in London and have to face a media firing squad." At that moment, the call button from seat 1A dinged. Sarah jumped as if she'd been electrocuted. "Go," Miller said. "Deal with the brat, then deal with the Titan." Sarah wiped her sweaty palms on her skirt, put her fake smile back on, though it now looked like a grimace of pain, and walked out into the first-class cabin. Blake Sterling was sitting in 1A, his feet up on the ottoman, crumbs of a croissant scattered across his chest. He had his noise-cancelling headphones on, one ear cup lifted. "Yo, Sarah," Blake said loudly. "The Wi-Fi is trash. It's super slow. I can't even load my Instagram comments. My uncle runs this airline. You'd think the net would work, right?" Sarah stood there, looking at this entitled child who had unwittingly just detonated her career. The urge to scream at him was overwhelming. "I apologize, Mr. Sterling," she managed to choke out. "We are experiencing some technical difficulties due to high traffic." "Well, fix it," Blake said, putting his headphones back on. "I'm bored." He had no idea. He was sipping champagne at 30,000 feet, completely oblivious to the fact that miles below them, his uncle's legacy was burning to the ground because he wanted extra legroom. Sarah turned away from him and looked down the long, narrow aisle toward the back of the plane. It felt like looking down the barrel of a gun. She had to walk past everyone, all the way to row 42, and confront the man she had humiliated. She took a shaky breath and started walking. Every step felt heavier than the last. Marcus was halfway through a documentary about minimalist architecture when he sensed a presence hovering over him. He paused the movie, slowly removed one earbud, and looked up. Sarah Jenkins was standing in the aisle. The transformation from the woman who greeted him at the door was startling. Her perfect posture was gone, her shoulders were slumped, The sneer had been replaced by a look of pure, unfiltered terror. Her makeup seemed to be melting under the harsh cabin lights. The large man next to Marcus was still snoring, and the teenager was still blasting his game, oblivious to the high-stakes drama unfolding inches from his face. "Mr. Thorne?" Sarah began, her voice barely a whisper. It cracked on his name. Marcus just looked at her. He didn't say, "Yes?" or, "How can I help you?" He just offered silence, a vast, uncomfortable silence that forced her to keep talking. "I have made a terrible mistake," she stammered. Sweat was beading on her forehead. "There was a mix-up with the manifest, a severe error in judgment on my part. I had no idea." "You had no idea I had money," Marcus finished for her, his voice calm, level, and devastatingly cold. "If I were just Marcus Thorne, the high school teacher, or Marcus Thorne, the plumber, seat 42E would have been good enough, wouldn't it?" Sarah flinched. "No, sir, that's not what I meant. Please, we want to make this right." "We?" Marcus asked. "The captain and I, and Aerovantage. We would like to escort you back to first class immediately. We can move Mr. Sterling. We'll find a seat for him elsewhere. Your suite is waiting for you. I'll get you fresh champagne, hot towels, anything you want." Marcus looked around the cramped economy cabin. He looked at the tray table with the dried coffee stain he hadn't made. He smelled the lavatory disinfectant. "No, thank you," Marcus said, putting his earbud back in. Sarah looked like she might faint. "Sir, please, you don't understand. Headquarters is on the phone with the captain. The news, the stock market." Marcus took the earbud out again. "Oh, I understand perfectly, Sarah. You see, I don't want champagne. I don't want a hot towel. I paid $10,000 for a seat that you stole from me because you preferred the look of the other guy. You made a value judgment based on optics." He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping so only she could hear. "Now, I'm making a value judgment based on optics. And the optics of me sitting here in 42E while your airline burns down around us, they are spectacular. I'm staying right here. Mr. Thorne, please, I will lose my job." Tears were now welling in her eyes. "You lost your job 3 hours ago at Gate B32, Sarah. You just didn't realize it until now." He put his earbud back in and pressed play on the documentary. He didn't look at her again. Defeated, Sarah turned and walked back toward the front. It was the longest walk of her life. 20 minutes later, the atmosphere in first class changed dramatically. Captain Miller, desperate and out of options, had made a command decision. He walked out of the cockpit and stood over seat 1A. Blake Sterling looked up, annoyed. "What's up, Cap? Still no Wi-Fi?" "Mr. Sterling," Captain Miller said, his voice tight with suppressed rage. "I need you to gather your things. You are moving seats." Blake laughed. "Yeah, right. Good one. Where am I moving? The cockpit?" "No, seat 42E. Blake whipped his sunglasses off. "Excuse me? Do you know who I am? My uncle owns this plane." "Your uncle," Captain Miller said through gritted teeth, "is currently on the phone screaming at ground operations because the man whose seat you stole just wiped $2 billion off the company's market cap in an hour. You are the reason this is happening. Now, move." Blake looked at Sarah for support, but she was staring at the floor in the galley. "This is bullshit," Blake yelled, causing the older couple in 2A and 2B to gasp. "I'm not sitting in coach with the peasants. Get up, or I will have federal air marshals meet the plane in London and arrest you for interfering with a flight crew," Miller said. He wasn't bluffing. He was desperate. Grumbling, cursing, and grabbing his Gucci bag, Blake Sterling was marched through the cabin. The real drama happened when they reached row 42. Marcus looked up as the procession arrived. The captain, looking apologetic, Blake Sterling looking furious and confused. "Mr. Thorne," Captain Miller said, his voice thick with humility. "On behalf of Aerovantage, I deeply apologize for the gross misconduct of my crew. We have removed the passenger occupying your seat. Seat 1A is yours." "Please." It was a public offering. The surrounding passengers were watching, wide-eyed. Marcus looked at the captain. He respected the man's attempt to salvage the situation, even if it was too late. He stood up. He stretched his legs, which were cramping badly. He looked at Blake Sterling, who was glaring at him. "Cute hoodie," Blake sneered, trying to retain some shred of dignity. Marcus smiled. "Thanks. It's comfortable for long flights in economy. You'll find out." Marcus stepped into the aisle. He grabbed his duffel bag. "Enjoy the middle seat, Blake," Marcus said softly as he passed him. "Try not to spill the tea. They're out of coffee." Marcus walked toward the front of the plane. He didn't swagger. He just walked. As he passed through business class, several passengers who had seen the news on their phones actually applauded quietly. When he reached the front galley, Sarah Jenkins was nowhere to be seen. She was hiding in the lavatory, crying. Marcus sat down in seat 1A. It was wide, soft, and private. A different flight attendant, the young man from earlier who had told him to turn off his phone, appeared instantly. He was shaking. "Mr. Thorne, champagne? Whiskey? Anything?" "Water," Marcus said, "with lime. And tell the captain thank you." He reclined the seat into a full bed. He closed his eyes. He still had 3 hours left to sleep before the real fireworks began in London. The descent into London. Heathrow was smooth, but the mood inside the aircraft was anything but. In seat 1A, Marcus Thorne was refreshed, shaved, and dressed in a crisp white shirt and a navy blazer he'd pulled from his duffel bag. He looked every inch the billionaire titan of industry. In seat 42E, Blake Sterling was miserable. His phone battery had died, the large man next to him had fallen asleep on his shoulder, and he had spent the last 3 hours stewing in impotent rage. In the jump seat, Sarah Jenkins looked like a ghost. She hadn't spoken in hours. She knew what was waiting for her when that door opened. As the plane taxied to the gate, the passengers turned on their phones. The collective gasp was audible. Every news app, every social media feed was dominated by one story. Aerovantage stock crashes after CEO Marcus Thorne racially profiled mid-flight. Boycott Aerovantage trending after one globally. Sterling Group calls emergency board meeting. The plane stopped. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Usually the door opening is a casual affair. Today it felt like the opening of a containment unit. The jet bridge wasn't empty. Standing right at the door were 4 people. 2 stern-looking London Metropolitan Police officers and 2 men in severe business suits wearing Aerovantage lanyards, corporate fixers sent from the London office. Behind them, at the end of the jet bridge in the terminal, was a wall of noise and light. The press pack. Dozens of photographers, camera crews and reporters were jostling for position. They had smelled blood in the water. The lead corporate fixer stepped onto the plane before anyone could get off. He ignored Sarah completely. He went straight to seat 1A. "Mr. Thorne," the fixer said, his voice polished but strained. "My name is Alistair Davies, VP of European Operations. On behalf of the CEO, Richard Sterling, we are profoundly sorry for the incident today. We have a private car waiting for you on the tarmac to take you directly to your hotel, bypassing the terminal and the press." They were trying to smuggle him out. They wanted to deny the press the visual of the wronged titan. Marcus stood up, slinging his duffel bag over his shoulder. He looked at Davies and smiled a shark-like smile. "No thank you, Alistair," Marcus said, his voice projecting clearly in the quiet cabin. I'll exit through the terminal like everyone else. I think the press might have some questions for me. And for your staff." He walked past the fixer, past the police, and stepped off the plane. The moment he emerged from the jet bridge into the terminal, the flashbulbs went off like strobe lights. The roar of questions was deafening. "Mr. Thorne, did they call you slurs? Marcus, how much are you going to sue for? Are you trying to bankrupt the airline?" Marcus stopped. He raised a hand, and the shouting died down instantly. He was a master of controlling a room, even an airport terminal. "I was denied the service I paid for because of what I look like," Marcus said, his voice calm, measured, and soundbite perfect. "Aerovantage made it clear today that their priority status depends not on your ticket, but on your connections and your complexion. My companies will no longer do business with an organization that operates with such archaic values. The market is simply reacting to that reality." He gave a tight nod and walked away, flanked by airport security, cutting through the crowd like Moses parting the Red Sea. Back on the plane, the nightmare was just beginning for the others. Blake Sterling tried to push past the flight attendants. "Out of my way, I'm the CEO's nephew." When he emerged into the terminal, he expected cameras. Instead, he was met by the second corporate fixer, a man with a face like granite. "Mr. Sterling," the man said coldly, grabbing Blake's arm with an iron grip. "You are coming with us. Your uncle is on a secure video link. He wants a word. Now." Blake paled. The tone suggested this wasn't going to be a friendly family chat. Finally, Sarah Jenkins had to leave the plane. She had delayed as long as possible. When she stepped off the jet bridge, there were no corporate fixers waiting for her. The two police officers stepped forward. "Sarah Jenkins?" one officer asked. "Yes," she whispered, trembling. "We need you to accompany us. There are allegations of violating aviation service protocols and potential discriminatory conduct that need to be officially logged before you leave the airport. This way, please." As she was escorted through the terminal, a few straggling photographers turned their cameras on her. Click, click, click. She saw the flashes blinding her. She knew this image. Her in uniform, looking terrified, being flanked by police, would be on the front page of every tabloid in the morning. She had wanted to cater to the powerful. Now, she was being crushed by them. The fallout didn't happen all at once. It was a slow, agonizing suffocation that began the moment the landing gear of Flight AV-88 touched the tarmac in London, and it didn't stop until the legacy of Aerovantage was nothing but ash. The financial bloodbath. The Monday morning following the incident became known on Wall Street as Black Monday for the aviation sector. At the opening bell, the sheer volume of sell orders for Aerovantage Holdings, AVH, was so intense that the New York Stock Exchange triggered a circuit breaker, halting trading for 15 minutes to prevent a total market collapse. But the pause didn't help. When trading resumed, the stock didn't just dip, it cliff-dived. In the mahogany-paneled boardroom of the Sterling Group in Chicago, the atmosphere was funereal. Richard Sterling, the CEO who had built the airline on a reputation of exclusivity, stood by the window, watching his net worth evaporate in real time on the Bloomberg terminal. Every time the red numbers ticked down, another $10 million of his personal fortune vanished. The phones weren't just ringing, they were screaming. Major corporate partners, tech giants, consulting firms, investment banks were pulling their travel contracts. The message from the business world was clear. We cannot be seen doing business with you. The Nepo baby's exile. While the boardroom burned, a smaller, more personal tragedy was playing out in Richard Sterling's private office. Blake Sterling sat in a leather chair, looking unusually small. He was still wearing the tracksuit from the flight, but the swagger was gone. The door opened, and Richard walked in. He didn't yell. He didn't throw things. His silence was far more terrifying. He walked over to Blake, extended a hand, and said one word. "Wallet." "Uncle Rich, come on," Blake whined, his voice trembling. "It was just a misunderstanding. The Lady Sarah, she said it was fine." "I am not your uncle right now," Richard said, his voice like grinding stones. "I am the CEO of a company you just helped destroy. Wallet. Now." Trembling, Blake handed over his wallet. Richard opened it, pulled out the limitless Black American Express card, the source of Blake's power, his identity, and his arrogance, and produced a pair of scissors from his desk. Snip. The plastic fell onto the expensive rug in 2 useless pieces. "You are hereby removed from the Sterling family trust," Richard said, turning his back on the boy. "The lease on your apartment in Tribeca has been terminated, effective immediately. The Ferrari is currently being loaded onto a flatbed truck downstairs. You have 0 access to family funds." "But how am I supposed to live?" Blake stammered, tears welling up. "You're a creative boy, Blake," Richard said coldly. "Go be an influencer, but do it with your own money." Blake was escorted out of the building by security. 6 months later, he was living in a basement studio in New Jersey. He tried to launch a Comeback King podcast, but the comment section was a relentless barrage of clown emojis and reminders of his behavior on Flight AV-88. He was eventually banned from TikTok for harassing commenters, fading into the obscurity of a bitter, broken man who used to be someone. The flight attendant's purgatory. For Sarah Jenkins, the punishment was far more visceral. She was summoned to AeroVantage headquarters 3 days after the flight. She expected a suspension, maybe a retraining course. She walked into human resources prepared to cry, to apologize, to play the victim. She never got the chance. The HR director slid a single piece of paper across the desk. Termination for cause. Gross misconduct. Violation of Federal Aviation Service protocols. "I can explain," Sarah pleaded. "There is nothing to explain," the director said, refusing to make eye contact. "You profiled a passenger. You escalated a situation based on bias. You are a liability. Please leave your badge and uniform on the table. Security will escort you to your car." But losing her job was the easy part. The internet had found her. Doxing is a cruel, swift weapon. Within hours of Marcus's statement, Sarah's full name, her Instagram handle, and even her home address were circulating on forums. She couldn't open her phone without seeing her own face, smug and sneering, superimposed next to Marcus Thorne's calm dignity. She was pariah. When she tried to apply to Delta, United, and American, her applications were flagged by automated systems before a human ever saw them. She was blacklisted from the aviation industry entirely. She applied for reception jobs, hotel concierge roles, even high-end retail. But every potential employer did a quick Google search, saw the articles titled "The Face of Air Rage Racism," and shredded her resume. Her savings dried up in 4 months. Her landlord evicted her in the 5th. Desperation is a powerful humbler. 1 year later, a customer at a discount grocery store in rural Ohio snapped a photo that went viral for a different reason. It showed a woman with dull, unwashed hair, wearing a blue vest, stocking cans of beans on a bottom shelf. Her name tag simply read S. She looked 20 years older. The sparkle of arrogance was gone, replaced by the dead-eyed stare of someone who knows they threw away a golden ticket with both hands. The corporate death spiral AeroVantage fought to stay alive, but Marcus Thorne was relentless. Victoria, his chief legal officer, didn't just file a lawsuit, she launched a legal crusade. She uncovered a pattern of systemic bias in the airline's upgrade algorithms. This revelation turned a single discrimination suit into a massive class-action lawsuit involving over 5,000 plaintiffs. The legal fees alone were bleeding the company dry. But the final nail in the coffin was the Thorne effect. Marcus had publicly stated that any company doing business with his private equity firm, Obsidian Dynamics, must certify they had no contracts with AeroVantage. It was an ultimatum. Do business with me or do business with them. You cannot do both. Given that Marcus controlled billions in capital and AeroVantage was a sinking ship, the choice was obvious. The airline lost 80% of its corporate revenue in 8 months. On a bleak November morning, less than a year after the incident, AeroVantage Holdings filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy liquidation. The haughty brand that had prided itself on being the king of the skies was dead. The final twist. 2 years after the incident, the liquidation auction was held in a sterile conference room in downtown Manhattan. The vultures were circling, hedge funds and logistics companies looking to pick the carcass of the airline clean. The most valuable assets were the landing slots, the coveted rights to land planes at prime times at Heathrow and JFK. Richard Sterling, disgraced and forced out as CEO but still a shareholder, was present to watch the dismantling of his life's work. The auctioneer began the bidding for the core logistics and gate assets package. Do I hear 100 million? 100, a representative from a Chinese shipping conglomerate called out. 150, a voice from the back of the room countered. The room turned. The voice belonged to a young woman in a sharp suit. She was representing a shell company called Apex Global Logistics. No one knew much about Apex, other than the fact that they had massive liquidity. 200 million, the Chinese rep countered. 300 million, the woman from Apex said, without blinking. The room gasped. It was an aggressive knockout bid. No one could match it. Going once, going twice. Sold to Apex Global for $300 million. Richard Sterling approached the woman as the meeting adjourned. Congratulations, he said bitterly. You got a hell of a deal. Who is your principal? Who owns Apex? The woman smiled. It was a familiar, sharp smile. I think he'd like to tell you himself. She held out a tablet. On the screen, a video call connected. Richard Sterling stared at the screen. Sitting in a sun-drenched office, wearing a simple charcoal hoodie, was Marcus Thorne. Hello, Richard, Marcus said comfortably. Richard's face drained of color. You bought it? You bought my airline? I bought the assets, Marcus corrected him gently. I have no interest in your brand. I'm going to repaint the planes. We need more cargo capacity for our tech shipping division. It turns out, stripping out the first-class seats makes a lot of room for server racks. You did this out of spite, Richard whispered. No, Richard. Spite is emotional. This is just business. Marcus took a sip of water with lime. Although I admit, the symmetry is pleasing. Your staff demoted me to economy. Now, I've demoted your entire fleet to cargo haulers. It seems we've both found our proper place in the market. Marcus reached forward and ended the call. The screen went black. Back in his office, Marcus signed the final acquisition papers. He walked to the window of his skyscraper, looking out over the city. He thought of Sarah Jenkins stocking shelves. He thought of Blake Sterling in his basement. He thought of the empty, rebranded planes sitting on the tarmac. He had turned a moment of disrespect into an empire. He adjusted his hoodie, sat back down, and went back to work. The world was full of people who judged by appearances, and Marcus Thorne was happy to let them keep making expensive mistakes. The story of Marcus Thorne isn't just about revenge. It's a brutal lesson on the cost of arrogance. In a world run by hidden power, the person you dismiss today could be the one buying your legacy for pennies on the dollar tomorrow. Sarah Jenkins and the Sterling family learned the hard way that the customer isn't just king. Sometimes he is the judge, jury, and executioner. If you enjoyed this saga of high-flying justice and absolute karma, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder to never judge a book or a billionaire by its cover. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.